everyone? Can you hear me? Yes. I just wonder if everyone can hear me, but I've actually put all the participants on mute at the moment, just so that everybody can hear me clearly. Good morning. Again, this is Kelly Alderson, the Communications Officer with the Extractives Department here at the World Bank. I'm going to open up this EITI Community of Practice webinar this morning, and then we will have a few speakers, and then open it up for discussion and questions. As you all know, the invitation that was sent around this morning, we have many distinguished guests with us here. We have Jess Moberg from the EITI International Secretariat here in Washington with us today, as well as Paulo de Sá, our Practice Manager for Extractives. Jonas will start off the session with a discussion of implementing the standard, the observations and lessons we've learned from the first round of EITI reports that have been produced under the standard, and implications of this for the future of EITI. He'll also be joined by two of his colleagues from the International Secretariat, Badi Balde, who is the Regional Director for Central Africa and Madagascar. And he will be speaking of a few specific country case studies, as well as Sam Topak, who also comes from the International Secretariat. He's the Regional Director for West and East Africa, who used to be the National Coordinator for Liberia EITI. And they'll both be using a few examples to illustrate how we've been implementing under the standard so far. And then Paulo de Sá, the Practice Manager for Extractives from the World Bank, will also make some comments in reaction to the panel. And then we'll open it up to everyone for questions. I'm very happy to announce that we have over 30 people calling in from different countries all around the world. We would love for everyone to introduce themselves, but I think that would take a little bit too much time. So we're just going to go ahead and turn it over to Jonas and his colleagues from the EITI International Secretariat. And when we have the Q&A session, each person that has comments can introduce themselves and say where they're from. Thank you.
In the call? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining, and thank you to the bank for arranging this. And I guess this is part of trying new ways of communicating, working, ensuring that we do these things together. And it is now I hear myself very badly, but no, it's okay. It's okay? Okay, great. Well, you're trying to constantly using new opportunities to communicate, to make sure that we stay in touch with everyone. This presentation is slightly changed by the fact that obviously some of you are hugely involved and are merely reporting on some of the work that you are doing, whereas others are following the EITI a little bit less. And therefore, you know, we are at very different starting points. So quickly look at some of these pictures. Most of you, I assume, have seen one. This is, of course, the way we have illustrating the EITI since the adoption of the standard 2 years ago, and of course we are in the spring of this year in the phase, if you like, of okay, we got the standard and we've got the first set of EITI reports under, and now it's a question of starting to look at okay, what is working and what needs to work even better. By and large, if we look around the 48 implementing countries and the vast majority of those that have produced one or more EITI reports, I think our message would be, and our take on all of this is that the standard works. It is on the whole a good instrument, creating the kind of platform for reforms that we were so keen on seeing. Look at some very quick highlights from EITI reports. And many of you know something new is, of course, that there's these descriptive chapters of or non-revenue data with a number of things. And we're seeing here how the EITI implementing countries are learning really quite quickly from each other. In some cases, we've maybe been a bit stuck of thinking that these kinds of things, descriptive, narrative, and so on, are things that could be well done by administrators. And I think we are increasingly learning that often, you know, it is probably actually something that can be better written by others. And we are in fact seeing a number of countries that are increasingly using this to not just explain, but also set out policy priorities. In some countries, there's even been talk of using it a little bit as not as a government white paper for what its policy is in the area, but actually something that the backing of industry and civic society in terms of policy priorities for how the sector is governed. And it's just from one of the countries. We jump down here. Can we go back? Back? Yes. Sure. Can I have that? Thank you. Okay. That's then I feel more in control here. Okay. So here is another example from Kazakhstan, and we've just highlighted here in yellow legal reforms being covered, fiscal mode, state participation, distribution of income, oil transportation, and a number of other issues. So some of the kinds of things that I think most of you would have found quite alien in an EITI report some time ago, but increasingly we're seeing that it's becoming part and parcel. And again, of course, let's remind ourselves, you know, the aim is, of course, to have practically meaningful information. We used to have too many EITI reports that were useful, that we did not contextualize and explain the information. Another aspect of this, and here's a good example from Mongolia, is that including a little bit of where included environmental protection and rehabilitation plan, mining development plans. Again, what you see is that you start to have information in the EITI reports that are indeed more relevant to local issues. Here, from a new kid on the block, the Philippines, of course, started to implement the EITI relatively recently, and despite the fact that they have it's a very big country with big bureaucracies and so on, they have managed to make progress really quite quickly. And I think it to show that if there is a bit of determination, a bit of political sponsorship, and professional execution, as it were, some of the EITI requirements and implementation are actually not that difficult to make use of. And here is an example of how they have included a chapter on rights of indigenous peoples, and these are maybe not things that are obviously part of the EITI remit, but when it comes to mining in the Philippines, you can't really talk about these things unless you also address some issues that relate to indigenous populations. Here from Ghana, the performance of the Petroleum Fund and other revenue management issues. Again, so one has used the EITI report to also report on the fund, and also on the back of that, one has then produced some recommendations that relate to the sector. Here is just, I hope here Kelly and others can help share these slides later on. if it's not already done to you all. But here are examples from a number of countries around the world on how the EITI reporting is being used to communicate some of the things that we've discussed. Sure. Okay. Here we have. I would like now to ask my colleague Buddy Balde to say a few words, diving in a little bit more to the DRC and to some of the things that have happened there.
Okay. Thanks. Hello, everyone. I am Buddy Balde, as Kelly said. I'm Regional Director for Central Africa and Madagascar at the Eiti International Secretariat. Very briefly here, and thanks for your participation. This is my first time to do this through webinars. It will be an experience. I understand also that this is only available in English this time around. Yeah. So just for participants there who are only francophones, I apologize for that. Some of our examples I'll be giving are based on francophone countries. So we share later the relevant documents related to that. So very briefly here, try to show, just present briefly how it has been used in a specific case, in this case the DRC, by state and non-state actors for informing debate and also promoting public evidence-based public policy. First, on state actors, is obviously one primary implementer and also beneficiary of the EITI. They use it for a number of as a diagnosis tool and as a forum for dialogue and reform. In this particular case here, the DRC may remember that they were suspended in April 2013, and then they had to implement a number of corrective actions. The reason why they were suspended was because they did not meet certain requirements that had to do with the quality of EITI reporting, namely requirements what we used to call 9 to 15 in the EITI rules, meaning that they were not, they didn't have reliable data, and the information wasn't comprehensive enough. In order to address those issues, they had to undertake a number of reforms. One of them was to reform their cadastral system to ensure that they have a good understanding of who is operating in the country. Second set of reforms had to do with the auditing systems to make sure that the government agencies that collect revenues are appropriately audited. So very briefly here, you will see on this slide in 2013. It's hard to imagine, but in this particular country, the DRC, nobody knew how many companies were operating in the country. So what they did was to task the CAMI, which is the system, the authority that manages the cadastre in the country, to update its and that helped weed some companies that were not active in the country, more than 100 of them, and also make a distinction between big and small companies. And you know, EITI is also has a methodology in terms of to make the reporting process more efficient. We want to target companies that pay a significant amount of revenues. So they have a reality threshold, and based on that, you have a smaller group of companies that you focus on to identify how much was paid. So as a result of that reform, they were able to, as part of the new standard, a more comprehensive report. In the last report was published December this year, was far comprehensive, and it's one that obviously not perfect, but many implementing countries would benefit. That similar challenges would benefit from looking at not only that report, but also how they progress through the years in terms of improvement. Slide I just chose to show, they have more than just the appendix of the report is they have 15 of them, but it just showed two. What has to do with the licenses and who is operating where, and as part of that, also beneficial ownership disclosure. And this is something that, as you know, it's not required, but it was a pilot that we were undertaking with a number of countries, and we were successful in getting a number of companies to disclose actually not just the legal owners of the license, but also the beneficial owner. So you take here a given company, you have all the shareholders to that company, and shareholders that have 25% or more have to disclose their names, and including politically exposed persons. This can be controversial, but important to identify the risk of conflicts of interest and so on. The second set of reforms had to do with improving the data reliability, and here you had to improve the way the system, the auditing system in the country works. Obviously, many Francophone countries in particular, functioning of the supreme audit institutions is very difficult. So as a result of that, it's always it was a very timely exercise for them to find alternative hybrid temporary solutions to task specific government agencies that specialize in auditing and help in that way improve reliability of the information, then also build the capacity within the supreme audit institution to do their work appropriately. I'm running out of time, so I will wrap up now, but here I just two examples I want to show here. One is that how they investigate discrepancies once reports are published. So there was, in the case of the 2010 report, they had an $88 million discrepancy, and the investigation of that led to its own way of bringing more accountability in the system. We need to own the companies and government agencies that manage these revenues. It's by the other part of this investigation is that it also brings all the information into one place. So there's no good understanding of actually what the sectors contribute to the sector's contribution to the economy, obviously, which goes beyond fiscal revenues. Here in this last report and in a number of reports we have seen under the standards, countries are increasingly attempting to show the full picture of the sector's contribution to the economy. You have contribution to GDP, contribution to employment. This is particularly controversial because you have fallen informal employment, and that's 300. You have then the fiscal revenues in the middle, which is about 64% of government budget comes from this sector, and the export figures, more than 90% of all exports from the country is from this sector. So just very briefly, another use of the Eiti report in the Eiti and the DRC by non-state actors, mostly campaigners, is to monitor complex contracts. First, understanding the contract and also monitor how they are implemented. Here is an example of the CoP agreement, which is a famous agreement that could be characterized as a barter agreement. It's a very complex contract, but this is a good example of civil society and government together trying to understand what all the sets of the contractual agreements mean and how they can be implemented and monitored to hold these government agencies accountable. Because it's a $6 billion contract. It's a very important part of their activities. And the way this is in each Eiti report, they show what was the amount of revenue that was dispersed that year to the infrastructure development in this case, and what infrastructure was realized. So on the table you can see which road was built and how long was the road and how much it costed and by whom, and so on and so forth. Another use of EITI in the DRC has to do with by non-state actors are actually parliamentarians and students. Parliamentarians, very briefly, I give the example of Congo-Brazzaville, in fact, where they that 98% of the government budget comes from the so it made sense that the parliamentarians actually use the EITI report in their in reviewing the budget from the government. Now, this particular country, EITI disclosure requirement, at least the timeliness of the data, is no longer an EITI standard issue. It's a parliamentarian issue. It's a parliament that requires the government to publish the report by a certain date. By the 3rd of September of each year, the data from the previous report needs to be submitted to Parliament from the EITI report so that they can review the government budget for that particular year. Finally, the more recent group that has worked, this is last board meeting that happened in Kinshasa and Brazzaville just last month. Here you have students. Now there are student clubs in almost universities so far. Just in this room we have 300 of them. They have close to 6 students from these 6 clubs. These are students who actually examine the data and try to, for writing thesis, but also trying to have more detailed analysis and also more interesting ways of presenting the data and communicating it to citizens in a much more appealing, exciting way. There are infographics and there are a number of ways they use this. So if we are a national coordinator out there, it's hard for me to tell who's the audience. This is a good example where you can engage students on the data, because a number of these countries' data is not readily available, and students need data. They don't need raw data for training for quantitative analytical skills. And so it is a good match for them to use this information, also generate a new debate and communicate the information in a more exciting and innovative way. I will start there and pass to my colleague, Sam. I understand we are running out of time. How much time do we have here, Kelly? 5 minutes. Okay, Sam, you have 5 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, but I have to switch sides because I understand the camera is on this side. So, let's spend 5 minutes quickly talk about Ghana and the sort of reforms and the impact of the ITI in that country. As many of you may know, Ghana became compliant in 2010. Has covered reports, EITI reports ranging from 2004 up to 2013, basically sort of after the got involved with the EITI process, decided to take a few steps back in terms of reporting to cover additional years. And that's why you see the 2004 to 2013. Up to late 2010, when they started oil production, the reports were basically focused on mining, but early 2011, they started production of oil, and henceforth they began to report on the oil sector. One advantage, one of the pluses of the process in the effectiveness of the multi-stakeholder group, they are quite effective, quite engaged in the process. Several discussions throughout on just about every topic. Civil society is quite independent and also involved in the process. Sometimes it gets a little frustrating because it's so effective to the extent that they don't need to, be sort of reaching out to me, in terms of like help, and I don't know, we got it under control. So in a way, that's pretty good. I think it's just to a large extent the sort of country ownership we talk about from time to time. Maybe next 3-4 minutes on subnational reporting, where I think the EITI has made quite a significant impact in Ghana. As you can see from this chat below, the revenue sector is mining sector. Let's start with the mining. From the mining, uh, 8% of the revenue generated goes to the national budget, and the remaining 10% goes into a mineral development fund, and the other 10% is sort of allocated to bodies and local government. One thing the reporting process in Ghana discovered was that there are lots of challenges in the governments from the to the regional and to the respective local communities. It's not as simple as, look, 20%, 10% will go to this community and therefore they get that. That was one of the findings throughout the years. Great. But just to put in perspective, imagine 40% of government's sustainability, the budget, comes from mining royalties. So the extent to which that amount that should be transferred to local communities and local governments for operational purposes or whatever they will so desire to do with it, if that amount does not come, if that amount is not coming, of course, there are challenges to operations. So the findings include the fact that amounts that should have been received from central government were not received in the other should have. In other words, what was received was not would have been received, and were received by the regional governments. Amounts had to be transmitted to the municipalities. That's not accurate. So where you have challenges in the first layer of transfer, there are also challenges in the second layer of transfers. Only got to arrive in the accounts of the local governments. There were also misappropriations. So you can see the complexities of the challenges. They used instead of development of projects. The report discovered they were used on the recurrent expenditures, buying flash costs and stuff like that. The entire accounting system itself was a mess. And have amounts coming in those kinds of triggers that makes it quite difficult for us to even budget. So there's a whole barrage of challenges. And what the ITI did was begin to work with local governments, regional offices, to ensure some degree of transparency and accountability, improving record keeping in those areas. Firstly, recommended that accounts be established, separate, dedicated accounts, just to create an account for track the use of those funds. There was a specific account, and this was done, and that certainly improved the use, the check, the balances of these monies. Also developed guidelines on how mineral revenues will be used. So these are the key things. Let's quickly switch to the out of time here. But if you quickly just slide, I think that's the final slide. Some recommendations for the most recent report that was published in December. That's the 2013 report. In the oil sector, there is a recommendation for the establishment of an online repository to sort of provide more information on blocks, oil blocks that have been granted. They have also recommended the introduction of licensing around. The process of awarding oil blocks or contracts in the oil sector has been discovered by the report to be efficient. And, they also asked the GNPC to begin to publish information on its investment spending. Finally, mining area, and this is quite important, I think, based on the discussions yesterday. 30% of production come artisanal miners. 4% is equivalent to the biggest three production, the largest three producers in the country. So you have Artisanal mines account for 34% of production, and you have the biggest three major users in the country, 34%. And so recommendation now to sort of begin to formalize that artisanal mining to generate more revenue from the sector. I will on this note. Thank you.
Thank you much, Buddy and Sam. So quickly to wrap this introduction up, there are, of course, challenges. As many of you know, data reliability is still an issue in some countries in their reporting, as is comprehensiveness. The accessibility, and what I mean by that is, of course, that a number of EITI report, in fact, the large majority of them are still PDF or non-accessible files, if you like. So making sure that we report in a different way, in a way that makes the information more easier to use, is a key priority. We, of course, with the EITI, face this issue of timeliness. Some of the EITI reporting is unnecessarily old. And a big part of the issue here is that often not reconciliation taking time, but procurement of the independent administrator takes time. We have another issue of duplication with other reporting processes. We are, of course, shooting ourselves in the foot if we create bureaucracy and if the EITI is not to greater extent part and parcel integrated with other reporting processes. So yes, we are in good results. We've heard about it from some of my colleagues, but still not quite enough in terms of delivering on our fundamental principle aim of transparency leading to improved accountability. So the EITI is now doing a kind of review of next where we might wish to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And there are some of the issues that the EITI board and others have identified that it thinks that it needs to look more at. And let me again start with, I think that there is a broad consensus that the EITI standard is by and large a good instrument. We got a lot right, and that is a testimony to the extent to which the standard was already in its early design reflecting good practices around the world. But more be done to embed the EITI in government systems, making sure that it's not a total standalone endeavor, but that it is part and parcel of other reforms, be they cadastre improvements or efforts to publish contracts, whatever it might be. There are also some ambiguities in the EITI standard and some things that needs tidying up. We also have a pilot on beneficial ownership, and findings of that needs to be dealt with, addressed by the EITI. Our quality assurance mechanism, and many of you dread this to some extent, and we should start off by recognizing that the EITI would probably not be where it is had we not had this system. It has had a fundamental importance of ensuring that the EITI has credibility, that the EITI stands for something. So it has been hugely important. That said, there are some flaws, we think, in this. It is a bit of a crude binary that EITI implementing countries have to go through. It's quite expensive. We also increasingly see that it doesn't quite give attention, reflect, put the spotlight on the good stuff, on the things that Sam and Buddy have talked about. Those kinds of things don't quite come through. And does it that a country that has a huge sector, does enormous a lot of good on a whole range of things, that misses one requirement that is enough to conclude that they that they shouldn't be compliant. So to I think in a good number of stakeholders, there's a recognition that the system needs some tweaking and improving. Part is always ensuring implementing country ownership, and that I think has been a driving force in many of these processes. I hope finally now that we will have an opportunity to discuss today and going further is indeed the specific reforms that try to capture impact as a result of recent EITI reports. Thank you much.
I hope that you were able to listen in and get some interesting comments and questions from that past discussion. I'm going to open it up now for comments and questions, but please do try to write into the comment section your question beforehand, since we could take everybody off mute for a few moments. But in order to try to avoid everyone speaking at once, let's go chat box, which is in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and you write in your question there, and I can call on you in an orderly manner. But in time, I will take the participants off mute. Yep.
On the role of civil society.
Hold on one moment. We're taking everybody off mute, so just wait one moment while everybody. And then if you have a question, please speak up very, very clearly.
That's why it's good. Do it.
Wait. Hello?
Okay.
Right. If you write in your questions in the chat box, I think we took everyone off mute and we're hearing a lot of interference. If you don't want to ask a question, if you put your line on mute, that would be very helpful. And then the people that do have questions can raise their questions and we will be able to hear them more clearly. No, you have to take it off again. Take it off again.
All of them. Okay, here someone.
Okay. Is it
I guess they have to do the translation.
Take Diana off. Hi, is Diana Casey there? And you have a question? Diana can translate?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Go ahead, Ali, and we have Diana on the line. Ali, please tell us where you are from, and Diana can. I believe Ali is a CSO MSG member from Iraq, and Diana is on the line, and she's going to help translate his question. And we have Jonas here, other members of the Secretariat, and Paolo also from the bank, if you need to answer your question.
علي تفضل. بدك تعرف عن حالك ولا احترجم؟
نعم. أنا علي من العراق، عضو مجلس أصحاب مصلحة المبادرة العراقية.
Is Ali, and he's from Iraq, and he's a member of the multi-stakeholder group, the Iraqi multi-stakeholder group.
ورئيس الشفافية في الصناعات الإخراجية.
And president of the ATII, which is the Iraqi Transparency Alliance for in Iraq.
ضمن عملنا في مجلس أصحاب مصلحة اللي هو جديد نسبيا بداية هذا العام، لدي بعض الأسئلة التي واجهناها مع ممثلي الحكومة أو الأمانة العامة في مبادرة الشفافية العراقية. فمثلا نود أن نسأل الاستهلاك المحلي ضمن المعايير هو موجود ضمن المدفوعات المحلية، واللي هي بالعراق تمثل أكثر من 20 مليار دولار، لكن زالت الأمانة العامة تصر أن هذا الاستهلاك المحلي غير مطلوب من قبل المبادرة في تقاريرها.
Okay, we are facing several issues at the MSG, and the specific one concerns the internal consumption of fuel in Iraq, and this amounts in value to over $20 billion annually. And still, when we ask for these numbers to be included in the report, the answer that we get from the National Secretariat is that it is not obligatory for us to include them in the report according to the new standard.
الاستهلاك المحلي لكن فقالات غير شفافة لا يشمل المطابقة بالشكل الصحيح مثل ما مطلوب من المبادرة، وكان في التقرير الأخير في عام 2012 حيث لا توجد مطابقة حقيقية لهذا الاستهلاك المحلي.
There was delineation for the internal consumption regarding the numbers. It was not properly reconciled for the last report that was issued, the 2012 report.
هذا واحد بالمواضيع. الموضوع الثاني نحن نلاحظ أن المبادرة تركز على شفافية التقارير ولا تركز على شفافية إدارة المبادرة المحلية من الدول.
Okay, this is one thing. Another thing that we'd like to point out is that the Secretariat, the EITI, is usually focusing on the transparency in the numbers found in the report and not on the process of issuing the report.
نجد أنه النظام الداخلي فيه كثير من اللغط، اتخاذ القرارات فيها مشاكل، الإجماعات لا يجب أن تحقق فيها النصاب، الإدارة هي تدار من قبل شخص واحد وهو يسير. اعتراضاتنا على هذا الموضوع لم نجد لها استجابة، نحتاج إلى دعم من المبادرة في هذا المجال لتحقيق التغيير في مجال إدارة المبادرة.
We always have issues, and we are raising them to the National Secretariat in Iraq regarding the meeting procedures, the whole internal bylaws that are governing the EITI, the local application of the EITI in Iraq, and we are getting no response. That's why we are now raising the issue for the International Secretariat, so maybe we can have some support and answers for the issues we are raising.
محاضر اجتماعات مجلس أصحاب مصلحة تنشر على الموقع الإلكتروني ويرفضون نشرها.
Okay, one example that we're going to give now, and you can check, is that the minutes for the meeting of our the MSG meetings, we have been continuously asking for them to be published on the website of the Iraqi EITI, and they have refused flat out to publish them.
Okay. Can I jump in here, Diana?
He is done. Yes.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Ali, I don't know if you understand English. Otherwise, I guess Diana needs to interpret back. But thank you so much. And for your information, we obviously don't have today the Iraqi Secretariat with us, but we have both Eddie Rich from the EITI. Oh, there I even see you, Ali. Hi there. Also Morad, who is involved from the World Bank side. Lily, I think that we recognize that there are a number of issues, both in terms of the EITI reporting in Iraq to date that it's addressing, and also in terms of governance within the process. You mentioned minutes, you mentioned the need to get answers and so on. And we are aware of this, and we want to continue to work together with you on these things. I'm slightly cautious also at the same time, because the International Secretariat Bank, yes, we have roles to play, but we must also be careful that the ITI internationally doesn't sort of handedly go around and, in a sense, undermine in-country ownership. Yes, we point out and work together to make sure that there are good practices. There are some limitations also to how far we can go in doing that. That this is otherwise not the place for a more detailed conversation, but we'll be happy to continue this directly with you, Ali.
Okay, يونس, I'll briefly, I'll actually translate all of this. علي بيقول لك يونس إنه هو بيعرف إنه في عندكم مشاكل بالنسبة للحوكمة وطريقة التقرير, ولكن هو كمان مش موجود في عندكم من السكرتارية الوطنية ليقدروا يجاوبوا. هاي أولا. ثانيا بحب يقول لك إنه هن بيقدروا موقفكم وبيتشكروكم لأنكم تطرقتوا لهم بهالموضوع, بس بيقول لك هو كسكرتارية دولية ما بيقدر انه يعطيك هلا جواب بالكامل على هالقصص, ولا بيقدروا يتدخلوا كثير, ولكن بيقدر يقول لك بيقدروا تماما يحكوا معك على طريقه منفرده لتقدر تخبرهم شو عم بيصير ويحاولوا يلاقوا طريقه للاصلاح.
أريد أضيف أنه أنا أذكر هذه المواضيع كخصوصية العراق, لكن أعتقد أن هذا الموضوع هو موجود في كثير من البلدان, فالسكرتارية الدولية أن تجد الحلول لهذه المواضيع.
Okay, Jonas, he appreciates this and he knows that this is not, it's not country specific, it's not for Iraq, this discussion, but he is also aware that these issues are are happening elsewhere also. That's why he believes it's an international issue more than of a local thing that is currently, you know, it's only bound to happen in Iraq. It's happening in more than one EITI implementing country. Thank you.
And there are many issues related to how the EITI governance process, how the EITI is governed in a number of the 48 countries. Sometimes it's not good enough, and we need to address that. Other times it's part of these are for many governments, many officials, a new way of doing things, and we also need to sometimes recognize that we cannot get it perfect from the outset. Some other questions here. Who's next? Okay, so Asmara, can you? Okay, you're going to be unmuted here, and then you can speak to your point.
Thank you. Should I quickly introduce myself? Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Asmara Klein. I work for the International Publish What You Pay Secretariat based in London, and I coordinate activities around the EITI there. I just wanted to thank you for the very interesting presentation, but also wanted to outline the important role played by civil society in the implementation of the EITI, because you brought forward examples where civil society has been particularly strong, well-coordinated, vocal, united in pushing the EITI, and I feel that this makes a big difference in the quality of implementation. So I just thought it would be important to highlight that it's important to invest in civil society capacities and ability to influence the process, both before joining the EITI and obviously throughout the process.
That's great. We certainly agree with that. Come on, Asmara, while you have the word, isn't there a comment or a question or something as well?
No particular question.
Fine. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Asmara. Anyone else? Wilson, can you hear us? It's written something, but maybe you are not unmuted. Here you are. I can see your name on the list here.
Am I in now?
You.
Wonderful, thank you. This is Judy Wilson from the US EITI Secretariat. And Jonas, I wanted you to expand a little bit on your slide. Talked about some of the considerations for EITI over the next 3 to 5 years, and expand on that, and then talk to us a little bit about what you think success is going to look like for the implementing countries in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. Well, thank you much, Judith. I think the first thing to say is this is very much not about adding requirements. about making, in a sense, suggesting to EITI implementing countries that they should be doing more. In fact, a number of occasions, I think it's about doing less. Okay, what does it mean? Norway has produced EITI reports now for, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years. The veracity of the data is not questioned. It's not particularly used. At the same time, Norway sees some good reasons for being part of the EITI. Does it make sense with expensive reconciliation reports, or can EITI reporting be done in a cheaper, in a way that is more meaningful? We believe it can. So we think that the standard needs to be better at reflecting the fundamental aims of the EITI. If the fundamental aim is to have practically transparent or information that we can trust, that is practically accessible, in all cases, don't think that that should mean reconciliation in the current form. So that's the kind of thing that we think that the EITI needs to look more deeply at. We think that information faster needs to come electronically available, not in PDF forms and so on. Those are some of the other things. We think validation needs to become somehow more nuanced. We think that there is an emerging consensus within the EITI family and ultimately its governing board and members meeting of what this means, but I think that there is a growing recognition that validation needs to reflect this better. To last question or comment, okay, so what does success amount to? At least that's how I understood you. Look, I think the answer to that question is depending on which country we're talking about. The EITI standard has, I think one of the things it has got right is that it has some basic minimum requirements, but then it is very much a menu, hoping that it's relevant for each and every person. I come from Sweden. We have our smorgasbords. There has to be some basic things out on that table to be a decent smorgasbord. But then there are different courses depending on your taste and how hungry you are. And I think to some extent it's the same with the EITI. The EITI's purpose and meaning in the US is of course vastly different from what it is in the RC. We see that the EITI fulfills a very different role in countries that are fundamentally open and in countries where there's a long way to go before they are fundamentally open. We see, of course, huge differences between countries with mining operations and countries that are rich with hydrocarbons. I think the answer lies in what kind of country and where the other political priorities in that country lies. Next question or comment. This is actually, if people are, it seems to sort of work. Yeah. Who wants to say something?
Can I question? This is
please.
Oh, this is Fidan Bagiroma from Energy. First of all, thank you very much.
Hang on, Fidan. Sorry, where are you in from?
All right, Fidan Bagiroma from Energy, Natural Resource Governance Institute.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Okay.
And calling in from where?
From Istanbul right now.
Yes, from Istanbul.
Yes.
Excellent. Very welcome, Fidan.
Very much thank you for your presentations, and actually it was very, good to know that EITI brought some very good, results, like DRC in Ghana. With data analysis workshop and, EITI Secretariat also was there in April, and actually it was obvious that there is a huge need for further data analysis. I mean, the data on the paper is not enough, not for people nor for experts. And there is a really great need for further data analysis of the EITI report. But to you as Secretariat, I have three particular questions. First of all, you mentioned about the reliability of EITI data. And when we were, for this workshop, preparing for this workshop, we find out discrepancies between, for example, data in an EITI report and other sources, even official sources. In Azerbaijan's report, although it is still a draft, and in annual report. To prevent that, discrepancies, how to guarantee, ensure that the information on EITI report is reliable? This is one question. Second question is, the information provided in EITI data, it's still not for ordinary citizens, You should at least be an economist or, some person working with data so that you can read it, proceed it. Should there be some requirement to produce some user-friendly version? For example, at least showing schemes where these flows come from, who is responsible. For example, in Azerbaijan report, it's unclear who is collecting, where these flows are going, etc. And again, when looking at the case of three countries in our region, Kazakhstan, Albania, Azerbaijan, PS agreements which are, confidential and which are not actually required by EITI standards, they actually, play the role of main information source for all these countries, three countries. And indeed, it's impossible, to cross-check, to read some information that it is inside of these PSA agreements. So are there plans to make the PSA agreements not encouraged, but, required, EITI flows requirements?
That's right. Well, thanks so much, Fidan. And I know, of course, my colleagues, Divik and Richard, were with you a couple of weeks ago at the workshop you mentioned. Look, I think the first is, there's a lot of priority going into data becoming more user-friendly in a whole range of different ways. I think we have a long way to go, but I think that should not deter us from being. We should up our own ambitions, all of us together, in using what is available out there now. There are already many conclusions and so on, so that can be made. So I guess my first point is, yes, let's get it better. Let's campaign for more, but let's also make sure that we make use of what we have. And absolutely right that many EITI reports are not for ordinary citizens, and many of them probably never will be. We do more in this area in terms of, and I think that a big step forward is now the fact that we will be using the IMF summary reporting template. What that means is that most countries, eventually all, will produce some key statistics in accordance with how IMF defines income from this sector, and those summary data sets, I think, will be easily understood and useful. Things going on here. We also think that yes, it's good if things are more used by ordinary citizens and so on, but we also have to recognize that a lot of reporting will be for ordinary citizens. GI, such as your own organization and others, will need to turn it into politics, to op-eds, questions in Parliament and whatnot, or theatre plays and so on, to in a sense make use of it in a way that is relevant for a wider audience. The last question, Fidan, was PSAs are not transparent in some of the countries in your region. Referred to here is that the EITI standard of 2013 encourages contract transparency. Now, the thing I want to say here is that sounds a bit bland. Oh, what does encourage mean? Be careful here. It's a strong encouragement. That encouragement comes, of course, with that country, the MSG, needs to motivate to publish its policy. And by to be forced to publish policy transparency means, in effect, that governments need to motivate that if they don't publish, they need to motivate why not. Now, it's quite difficult to motivate why you are against transparency. I consider it quite a strong and quite a clever encouragement. I think that it's a sign of that the EITI is not a feeble, lowest common denominator, but it is actually leadership in the fact that the EITI got big industry, big American companies and so on to sign up to this. So it has a very strong force because of this. Now, frankly, I don't think that it will happen anytime soon. And now something got dark here. But anyway, I think it will happen anytime soon that this will become required. But I think in the meantime, us have much more to do in terms of making use of this. We need to be better at collating good practices. We need to be better at saying this is a good website where contracts are available in an easily understood way. We need to work with commercial lawyers that are increasingly telling their clients, listen, client, you pay my bill, but my recommendation to you is that all PSAs should be made public. Those kinds of lawyers and others we need to work with better. We need to take this argument better to both governments and others. Right. And Zainab Ahmed. So, Zainab, can you hear me? Here, Zainab is head of EITI in Nigeria. So she oversees possibly the most comprehensive, the most complicated, one of the most challenging, but I guess also most interesting and potentially significant EITI processes. Zainab, can you hear me, and do you have a question, and can you speak?
No,
okay, we lost Zainab somehow. Someone else?
Hello?
Okay, yes? Who are you?
Hello?
Hello? Okay. Can I ask that?
Yes.
My God.
Okay, I think we haven't got much time left, and it seems like there was no one that had a question. Oh, what, Jean-Jacques, did you have a question? No.
No question.
No question. Okay, great. Eddie Rich, Deputy Head at the EITI. Mike, Ed, do you wish to say anything?
I think it's an interesting conversation. I refer back a bit to what Ali had said at the beginning. I think there are a number of domestic or internal process and governance challenges that the EITI is facing in lots of countries. The one about the internal governance of the EITI has been somewhat strengthened since EI rules. And remember, only one country so far has gone through validation against the standard, that's Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan didn't meet the requirement on internal governance. So we can begin to see how that is biting. These countries are going to have to demonstrate that their internal governance systems are right. And I think we all have a responsibility, not obviously just in the International Secretariat, but World Bank and implementing countries and supporting organizations all around, help countries to get these systems right. And I think we've seen in lots of countries that this matters. this matters to the effectiveness of the EITI. It's not the only thing that makes it meaningful, but if papers don't arrive in time, as Ali describes, then there is a problem about having an informed conversation around the MSG table. So we are going to have a big emphasis over the next year, requirement one, on internal governance, alongside a lot of these other stuff about use of data. We can all do that together. So thank you for the point and the floor.
Jen, from Shervin Long, and then I'll hand over back to the World Bank to conclude this. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to find out.
Sorry, can you tell us who you are?
Okay, sorry, I'm Shervin, head of the TTEITI Secretariat. So,
hello.
I wanted to get feedback from you on regards to sections of the standard has proven to be the most difficult for countries to abide by, and how have these issues been addressed at a board level? You could give me the top three problem areas.
Wow. Thank you very much, Shervin. I said we would close soon. That was a big one, and I guess it's that on this call that can speak better to this than I can. Look, and I think that we have to recognize that many of the challenges have related to making sure that the EITI report is comprehensive, that really the revenue flows that need to be covered are covered, that an adequate number of companies operating in the sector are indeed disclosing. So the comprehensiveness of the data an issue. In other countries, in particular on the government side, reliability of data, at least in the early years, was an issue. You know, if an audit body has not signed off on government data and so on, those are big issues. As Eddie Rich just said, and relates also a little bit to some of the comments we had a moment ago, I think that there are some governance issues in a number of countries that have been thorny, difficult to deal with. I'm not sure that one of the greatest challenges has been in terms of validation and so on, has related to impact, to whether it actually EITI is doing what it ought to do. But I do think that the too many countries where sort of one has gone through the technicalities of EITI, but hasn't quite led to the kinds of things we want. And so that it has been, in a sense, poor at delivering accountability or improved trust building or improved fighting of corruption in some countries. That also has, I think, to be acknowledged. On that note, we would.
We have one more.
Okay, one more question. All right. Sorry, but thank you, Shervin, and I think we'd like to come back to your challenge, in a sense, that you have put to us. Steve, from Multi-Stakeholder Integrity. Can you hear me?
Hi, thanks for having me. Stephen Winstanley from MSI Integrity, calling from Washington, D.C. I apologize if there's a bit of a feedback. I noticed when I was testing my audio that it was coming back and forth. Is this all right?
Well, you hear you perfectly, so bring it on.
Most of my thoughts go back really quickly to Ali's points and also to Eddie's as well. Both excellent points. With when we were conducting our study on, which was very narrowly focused on MSG governance, we heard from members in 15 countries and others that weren't included in our in-depth study, that one of the big issues they were having was when they raised about wanting to include more topics in EITI reports, they were told, this goes beyond the mandate. We can't include that. That's not in the standard. That's not relevant because it's not in the standard. Not that it's not relevant to extractive industries transparency. Just you and I have spoken about this before, and we know that it's encouraged that you should go beyond the EITI standard, and it's even very clear on the EITI website. So my question would be, how can we, international supporting actors, EITI Secretariat, and in the system, communicate more clearly to national implementing countries that not only can they include relevant information that MSG members from their local countries want to include in reports, but they're encouraged to do so, and that the standard only sets out the minimum requirements of topics to be included in reports. And then really quickly, 2 points just out of Ali's comments from Iraq. Touching on, Jonas, your comment about validation, that it's a very important process that has led to improving credibility about the implementation of EITI and reflecting that through these reports. As one who looks at international multi-stakeholder initiatives all the time, I think it's important to emphasize that value of exercise is absolutely an essential element for MSIs, verifying that the standards they set are being implemented by implementing actors, and fundamental importance to credibility of MSIs over time from what we've seen. And finally, it seems fairly relevant to just quickly raise that Ali's concerns being raised in this forum points to, again, the fact that the Mint clearly communicated at least an independent international level grievance mechanism where actors at the local level know that they can raise types of concerns to the EITI Secretariat or to the board or some other group. And I think, it's a thing to set up perhaps, but it's the only specific requirement in the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights related to MSIs that they have such an independent grievance mechanism. And important to ensure the local ownership of EITI and the EITI standards come together in the same way by allowing local actors that kind of a pathway to communicate concerns beyond their national sphere. Thank you for having me. It's been enjoyable.
Okay, may I just add something here, please?
Okay, one last one seems to be keen here. Remind us who you are.
Diana from the International Secretariat of Publish What You Pay. I just want to reiterate and just add a small thing on MSI Stephen's comment. And I would like to say here that the way, the more we are dealing with multi-stakeholder groups, the more we are seeing that it's basically, Jonas, and I have to be very, very frank here, it's not that the International Secretariat of the EITI is actually failing, let me put it that way, to interfere in a corrective way. We believe, and I see it from the following point of view. It's the National Secretariat of the ITI in the implementing countries that are actually most of the time not delivering the proper information or impeding the proper process. We find, especially the representatives of the CSOs on the MSG, they have a good understanding of what the standard is, and when they try to apply it, even the basic stuff, as Ali said, regarding something as simple as issuing the minutes, they again are stopped by the National Secretariat. I think we should redirect the question as to how do you plan, as the International Secretariat of the ITI, to reform or deal with the National Secretariats and the application of their vision of EITI on the ground. Thank you.
This is turned out to be a very rich conversation, and one of the things that and my colleagues commit to do is to ensure that this is taken on in other fora within the ITI board and elsewhere. I think that at the core of what Stephen and also Diana is bringing up again is this, if you like, tension between the ITI being a global minimum standard on the one hand, and making sure that you have national ownership on the other hand. And I think the ITI is doing quite well, but it's not easy to getting a balance right here. In terms of Stephen's first challenge of what more can be done, I suspect that there aren't a sort of silver bullet, but that there are a whole range of different things that can be done to make sure that encouragements are taken up more. It's a question of incentivizing. I really, as I've indicated, like the way that the contract transparency encouragement is tied with a requirement of disclosing policy, because that sort of tips the button. It changes the incentives. It makes some of those that have to be forced to come out to say why they are against openness. I think those kinds of clever ways of encouraging we need to do more of. We also need to be much better at using EITI to see how it is bringing change in the DRC, for example. We need to illustrate right up that impact and incentivize politicians to be more reform-oriented, and so on and so forth. So I think that it's too easy to think that let's go back and fight for some tougher rules here and there. There might be needs for that too, but I think that there are many soft things that we can all contribute to. Stephen, that grievance mechanism, so when things are not right, and we've heard from Ali and Diana, indeed, there are grievance mechanisms within the ITI. There's no question about that. They're not called such, but there are a number of different instruments which can be used to communicate concerns with the fact that the ITI's requirements are not being adhered to. But it may well be right that we need to do more to communicate these channels so that it's clear to everyone how they can go about using them. Last thing, Stephen also mentioned validation and its importance, and I totally agree with you there. But what I would say is I think that we need to be careful in the ITI context here. It's a kind of, to me, it's a false reassurance at the moment. If small countries that hardly implement the ITI can become EITI compliant, whereas countries that do an enormous amount of work and bringing in all kinds of encouraged aspects, being part of the beneficial ownership pilot and all sorts of things. And in a sense, they now look set to become, to some extent, punished for so being. So I do think that it's a rather crude system that we have at the moment, and that is something that needs to be addressed a little bit more. Over time, I'm not sure that this worked perfectly, but there has been good questions. We have brought together people in a different way. We, of course, have many training seminars, regional workshops, NRGI, Publish What You Pay. The companies are increasingly doing pure company training, which is fantastic as well. So we are seeing a lot of different things. And my conclusion from today is that this form of communicating is something we need to do more of to complement other efforts. Maybe we should have more specific conversations in this kind of channel related to reporting specifically, or multi-stakeholder governance, procedures, and so on, and have more expert conversations diving in. So I think that there's a lot that we, together with the bank, can learn from today in how we do this, and come back and do it in a more targeted way, maybe also bringing in others from the outside more from the beginning. So many thanks to Ken and others here at the bank for enabling us to use this channel, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate what Jonas said, is I do think that this has been a great opportunity to bring together the practitioners from the countries into this forum we're having in Washington with the bank together with an international secretariat. I do think it's very crucial to the discussions and the work that we're doing to incorporate the voices of the implement countries as well as the CSO organizations on the line. So I think that your feedback has been really valuable to us, and we will continue to use these types of forums to communicate with you all from your own, computers without having to travel and being able to talk about these issues. So with that, I think we will close and look forward to you all calling into our next community practice webinar in a few months. Thank you very much.